Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ning Kavat. This is the moment a Chinese Coast Guard vessel rams and grinds into the back of Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Teresa Magbanua. But China is insisting it was the Philippines that rammed the Chinese vessel.
8月31日，在香槟礁西湖长时间非法滞留的菲律宾海警船，以不专业、危险的方式故意冲撞中方现场维权的海警船。
When pressed on how the Philippines could have rammed the front of the Chinese vessel from its back, Mao replied, "This is the root cause of the current escalatory situation at Xianbin Jiao, the Chinese name for Sabina Shoal. The measures China took are aimed at protecting its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests." As the EU and the US rebuke China for its acts of aggression within Manila's internationally recognized exclusive economic zone, we ask where things are headed. Joining us today are Tony Hu, former US Department of Defense for China, Taiwan and Mongolia Senior Director, and Liu Fu-kuo, National Chengchi University Institute of International Relations Research Fellow. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Sabina Shoal, located 86 nautical miles from the Philippines and over 600 nautical miles from China, is now the newest hotspot in the West Philippine or South China Sea. In April, the Philippines discovered piles of crushed coral, raising concerns that China might build an artificial island. Since then, the Philippines has stationed its own vessel there to prevent any further China action. Professor Liu, let me come to you. So going back to Mao Ning's comments, in your view, did she admit to China being the aggressor? This is the part that I'm talking about. She says that the measures took are aimed at protecting China's territorial sovereignty.
I think since many of us are looking into the longer time frame, which looking back in the last 3-4 decades, if there would be a historic understanding of exactly what happened on the ground, we would definitely understand the reason why Chinese government made such a statement, because the reason why China lately has mobilized more than almost 200 different ships guarding against Sabina Shoal, because there is a strong reason they don't want to see things reduplicate as a second Thomas Shoal back in 1999.
Professor Liu, you pointed out China's perspective, but there's also the Philippine perspective, right, which is that it does not want to see another mischief reef.
Yes, exactly. Because a few months ago...
And let me just say that Mischief Reef is a fully militarized artificial island built by China.
Right, right. I think the Philippine government discovered before the summer, there may have already shown some specific construction work inside Sabina Shoal. So they are referring, perhaps China is preparing for large scale of land reclamation inside.
Tony, what do you make of Chinese behavior, first in the ramming of the Coast Guard vessel, but then the release of video, which clearly showed that it's the Chinese ramming the Philippines, and the reaction or the messaging from the Chinese Foreign Ministry?
Right, China claims almost the entire South China Sea. And so they feel they have the right to chase out those who consider to be intruding. And they're trying to justify their aggressive behavior by saying these are intruding into China's territory, therefore we have to take this aggressive action.
But who's ramming who? That's actually a different level.
So the aggressive action, obviously, from the video you can see is taken by China. And also their claim has been disputed and proved as invalid by the 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So most of the world doesn't recognize that claim, but Chinese people doesn't know it. So they're enforcing it and they're taking aggressive action.
A spokesperson from Taiwan Central Police University has said, and just to get your thoughts on this, China's practices have nothing to do with the framework of UNCLOS, which has established a framework for peacetime. They resemble more sort of low-level armed conflict than law enforcement. What was your thoughts?
Absolutely. You look at it, the actions they're taking, the use of the maritime militia and how they use these so-called civilian ships in a military purpose, where they do their formations and they're under command of the Coast Guard. They are not really taking a peaceful response. I think they are doing a low-level military response and stay within the gray zone area.
So it's not just the tactics themselves, but also the kind of the grade of the vessels. I understand that they're mostly steel-hulled. They're basically corvettes that have been brought over from the Chinese Navy to use as a Coast Guard.
Right, so their Coast Guard ships are getting larger and larger with this type of purpose, because I think if you look at what happened, let's go to how Japanese responded to Chinese aggressive action near Diaoyutai. Japanese responded by force. They also used strong water cannon with large ships against the maritime militias that came up. So right now, you don't see China harass Japanese as much as they are harassing the Filipinos, because the Japanese has responded forcefully.
Okay, let's go into that a little bit later. So, as Professor Liu mentioned, starting August 20th, Beijing has dispatched more than 200 vessels around Sabina Shoal to prevent the resupply of the Philippine vessel. This is what Philippine Secretary of Defense Gilberto Teodoro said about the rapid buildup.
In this region, China, although without saying it, and I'll say it for you, is the biggest disruptor of international peace in the ASEAN region.
And in relation to the increasingly difficult resupply of the Teresa Magbanua, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Chief Admiral Samuel Paparo said this.
Certainly within the context of consultations, every option between the two sovereign nations in terms of our mutual defense, escort of one vessel to the other is an entirely reasonable option within our mutual defense treaty.
Paparo said American forces were ready with a range of options to deal with increasing acts of aggression in the South China Sea if ordered to carry them out, and jointly and after consultations with the Philippines. Professor Liu, what do you think the options are that Paparo might be referring to?
Because there is a mutual defense treaty signed back in 1951 between the Philippines and the United States. So many politicians and also top military officials from the US as well as the Philippines reiterated this treaty many times in the past. But whether this may be a good time for the US to reactivate this treaty, nobody knows where this the line. But checking back to this original treaty, Article 4 and Article 5, it indicated if a party concerned, these two parties, armed attacked. So the key question is which one can be defined as an armed attack in the scene. So I think Tony just made it very clearly. Chinese Coast Guard is utilizing gray zone tactic in the scene. So it would be very difficult to define this action, even if aggressive action can be considered as an armed attack to one of the party there.
Tony, do you think then as a result, the Mutual Defense Treaty needs to be revisited, needs to be redefined to make it clearer, or is that not the way?
I don't think that's necessary. It's unfortunate that President Marcos had said himself that he would consider invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty if a Filipino suffered death during the incident. So he basically said anything before the killing of a Filipino person that he wouldn't invoke Mutual Defense Treaty. I think that's a mistake.
Right.
That's very, very bad mistake, because when the Chinese Coast Guard used an axe to hit the Filipino ship, is that an armed attack? I think Philippines should have remained unpredictable, and because armed attack, once again, as Professor Liu had indicated, that's in the Article 4, it should be left to the interpretation of the side that's being attacked, not from the side that's doing the attack. So the side that's being attacked should have the right to determine when it's under attack and when to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. I understand Marcos is trying to de-escalate, but I'm afraid China might take it as backing down, as a weakness, and they will continue to push until, hey, I didn't kill one of your guys, I'm going to keep on ramming your ship.
So you're saying rather than focusing on the result, on the ends, it should really focus on the method that China is using? Right.
An armed attack is a method because of its aggressiveness, not necessarily the result of a person's death.
Right, yeah. And do you think it should be defined via firepower versus non-firepower?
By the action.
Right, or do you mean by the aggressiveness? So even non-firepower attack could still be be very violent.
Right, they can like I said, when they use the axe, it was a hostile intent, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously I'm sure there are other people who disagree with me, but I believe Philippines should reserve the right to interpret when that armed attack happened.
Right, okay. Professor Liu, do you think that when the US says that it will escort the resupply missions, do you think that that will be with the Coast Guard or the Navy?
Basically, I should think that it has to be Coast Guard because currently there is a gray area whether this is something direct conflict or just a clash between two sides. And I think if the U.S. does send a Coast Guard, a company, or escort the Philippines ship for resupply purpose, it would even further complicate the situation on the ground. And I'm hoping, basically, the U.S. should not do so. Otherwise, the situation will become very complicated to be solved. But of course, it is the right time and also fully understandable in the region that the U.S. would have a full commitment to such a treaty alliance for such a security protection.
Let me bring Tony in.
I think the U.S. is trying to demonstrate resolve on its commitment to a friend because the U.S. couldn't figure it out, or U.S. is not sure if this is a test by the Chinese on U.S. resolve to help a friend, because that could very well be China's test to see if U.S. couldn't commit to helping Philippines, would U.S. commit to helping Taiwan? So I think it's important. I'm sure somebody's considering this in Washington, also over in Hawaii, whether this is actually a test by the Chinese. Therefore, should U.S. act? Of course, there's always the risk of escalation. And hopefully the United States, if and when we do deploy the Coast Guard ships, they will be equipped with non-lethal systems such as sound wave and microwave, in addition to water cannon.
But are you saying that if the U.S. was to escort the Philippines, are you saying that China would still attempt to stand in the way, to ram the U.S. vessels, or Philippine vessels?
They will not ram with the Coast Guard ships. They will use the military militia, the small boats, because most people don't know this, where China has challenged many U.S. warships in South China Sea by having these maritime militias get in front of the U.S. ships and throw these humongous wooden logs to force U.S. ships to change direction or stop to avoid damage. Obviously, this is illegal and dangerous, but they know U.S. wouldn't use weapon against these militia ships, the so-called fishing boats. So I suspect they'll use same tactics.
Okay, Philippine Armed Forces Chief of Staff Romeo Brawner says the Philippines still has options available. He said US support will be the last resort when all other options are exhausted, as the country prefers to carry out resupply missions independently. And yet, following the latest helicopter resupply, both the Chinese Coast Guard and Foreign Ministry lashed out. Spokesperson Gan Yu said such risky behavior by the Philippine side is highly prone to causing unexpected incidents at sea or in the air. Professor Liu, does that sound like a threat to you?
China gradually, of course, the frequency is increasing. Over the last almost 20 years, China, when its capability, Coast Guard capability, becomes number one in the world, And obviously, China shows its capabilities, it's overwhelmed everyone. So they have really make their presence almost everywhere inside the so-called 10 dashed lines.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is can be singled out as this aggressive or dangerous behavior. Because
let me quote to you what China think tank South China Sea Situation Probing Initiative said. Should the Philippines continue its air intrusions, and it was talking about the helicopter resupply, China will be forced to take corresponding measures. Friction or even collisions in the air could have consequences more severe than ship collisions.
Yes. I know this is not something that we have not seen before. If the situation becomes much tenser, the Chinese media or think tank people will come up to appeal to the Philippines. Something is coming on the way. But I should say, of course, currently, I'm hoping this mutual consultation mechanism, which happened back in July 2nd, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from...
For second Thomas Shoal.
Yes,
Yeah.
the meeting was held in Manila and came up with such a peaceful, short cool down. But later on, something obviously changed to much extreme way.
Tony, but what's the next logical step if the Philippines cannot, for example, get through by sea, it cannot get the supplies through by air, by a helicopter, then it would seem that it would need to turn to the US as the last resort, which is not what China wants.
Right, or Filipino give up. So right now, China believe might is right, and right now they are might. So they will continue to enforce. Even when you try to talk, they will try to make sure they get to the end that they want through talks. So I think it's important to continue to hold Filipino to hold the ground. And remember, appeasement is never a good solution when you're faced with countries like China. So therefore, if China continue to issue this type of warning, and I do feel it is a threat, then I think Filipino seriously should consider, since they don't have the same might, maybe they need to have friends to help them.
Right, which they have. The US has said it's ready and willing to escort.
Right, I think obviously diplomacy is the desired way to solve a problem. However, through the years, you look at how China does, is trying to, they think the means justify the end. So I think if they can't get to the end by one means, which is through negotiation, they will continue to pursue the more aggressive side. So therefore, you need to counter that somehow and meet with that. Meet aggressiveness with aggressiveness.
Professor Liu, let's talk about Sabina Shoal. In terms of its strategic value, what is it in your view?
There are two significant points to be mindful. Number one, the location, as you just mentioned, is so close to Palawan Island, and geographic importance show that this is worthwhile for China to do something more on the shelf. And basically, looking into the map, everyone should know that in between Second Thomas Shelf and Palawan. So in the past, all the resupply actually came from Palawan. So strategically, if China can strengthen strategic outposts in Sabina Shoal, it would be much easier to cut off this supply line. And this is number one consideration. The second one is a geographic feature. Looking into geographic feature, Sabina Shoal itself is the largest coral reef in the entire spread to the island, even larger, bigger than Mischief Reef. So in this sense, if China would be able to consider to conduct such a land reclamation, it can build another massive artificial island there, which will become very strategically important, putting lots of pressure on the Philippines.
Right. And Tony, let's place Sabina Shoal in terms of, it's like, perhaps we can call it the third hotspot, Scarborough, Shoal originally, second Thomas Shoal, and now Sabina Shoal.
Yeah, Sabina Shoal, like Professor Liu said, it would, if China landfills it and make it a military base, it would be the closest spot to the Philippines. And if you recall, many of the bases that Filipino opened up for the United States deployment is right there in Palawan. And if you look at the other location, which is over at Scarborough Shoal. Scarborough Shoal is just west side of Subic Bay, a huge naval base and a major port right now, and Manila Bay. And China basically occupied it in 1992 and forbid Filipino claim against it. So strategically, that location is probably the most important of the three, because from that location, they can choke Philippines economically. So Scarborough Shoal is actually strategically more important. And so unfortunately, Filipino couldn't defend against the Chinese occupation of that area. So of the three locations, I would say Scarborough Shoal is more important, and the United States continue to watch that, because if United States forces are going to deploy to Subic Bay, it would be very bad to have Chinese forces sitting right there.
Let's move, Professor Liu, now to the visit by the Vietnam's Defense Minister Phan Van Giang to meet with Teodoro, and they agreed basically to advance their defense and military cooperation. Now, we saw the joint Vietnam-Philippine Coast Guard drills for the very first time, and now this visit and deepening Navy cooperation. So how do you view this cooperation, this more deep partnering on Vietnam's part?
This is a very interesting information, because in the last few days, after the visit between two defense ministers, many look into Filipinos and Western media, showing that this is a strengthening defense alliance against China. But if you can really look into Vietnamese official news, which is a much more regular routine collaboration with members of ASEAN or close neighbors. So nothing really special, because I interpreted very details about what they said on this particular meeting. And just
but they must also know that to do this at this time, when there are such public and intense confrontations and clashes between the Philippines and China, this would surely have a reaction by China.
I think traditionally, Vietnam and the Philippines are under such pressures from China. So just before President Duterte, Vietnam and the Philippines really seek for this strengthen their comprehensive partnership. At that particular point, really played against China. But don't forget, when we are discussing this ministers' meeting, just 1 week before, the top leaders, Secretary General of Vietnam Communist Party, just visited Xi Jinping in Beijing, and they want to deepen their collaboration between two communist parties. So this is a larger strategic background. Vietnam at this moment, as I personally think, Vietnam would really like to have a closer, deepen their relations with China. And of course, at this moment, they want to also make sure their neighbors will work together. That's all about it. And
so it's not sending a message to China to say that we can also partner with the Philippines, which is US allied.
Of course, everyone is playing this double-sided diplomacy. Especially, we describe Vietnamese foreign policy as bamboo diplomacy, shifting on the different sides. But I think, as I can see, this is a quite normal, regular collaboration, even if the timing is critical. But I don't think it will come with such a different special meaning to such a conflict before we discuss China and the Philippines.
Okay, Tony, final question about the Typhoon missile system. Now, this caused a bit of controversy. Beijing basically said that the presence of the missile system risked war. Now, it was brought to the Philippines by the US before the Balikatan exercises. It wasn't used. The US said it was a test of whether it could be transported by air. What's your view about the Philippines purchasing this system? What message does it send? What deterrence value does it have?
I think it's very disingenuous of China to say this type of system risk war, because if you look at what missile systems are deployed in southern China, so if China was going to attack any targets in South China Sea or Philippines, most likely they will use the Dongfeng 16 and Dongfeng 21. Dongfeng 16 has a range of 1,000 kilometers. Dongfeng 21 has a range of over 1,500 kilometers. Basically, from Guangzhou, they can hit Manila. And to say Filipinos try to defend themselves using Typhoon system, which can employ both the SM-6, ground launch SM-6, about 500 kilometers, and Harpoon, the Tomahawk missile, 1,500 kilometers. So it's similar system, and Filipinos trying to acquire some system to defend themselves where China already has that system that can strike Philippines. So I feel, like I said, the real threat is truly from China, and they point out the people, but they themselves is the one that's threatening the region.
So the double standards. We're going to have to end it there. I'm so sorry, we've run out of time. Tony Hu, Liu Fu-kuo for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the shows today. Stay safe and see you next time.